Oh yeah. Alright, so last section we got Lexington and Concord. Colonial Militia chases the British back into Boston. So now we've got this situation where the Colonial Militia completely has the city of Boston surrounded. And it just so happens that people were meeting in Philadelphia for the Second Continental Congress just about the time that this went down. And they hear about it and they're like, you know what? That Colonial Militia, yeah, we're throwing in with them. That's our Continental Army. Of course, they have no commander. They have no coordination, no supplies, no anything. But the British are like stunned in Boston. They really have no idea what to do. Thomas Gage just isn't really himself. He's afraid to do anything until he gets a response from King George III. And of course, it's going to take a while for King George III to hear about this. News has to cross the Atlantic. He has to get with his advisors, decide what to do. But, you know, King, he eventually is going to hear about it. And his reaction, dude's angry, man. He's ticked off. And, of course, whenever he hears that the British Army was beaten back into Boston, he calls his undersecretary a liar. He's like, no, we won. He's kind of like in denial, and he's like, oh, all the stuff we were trying to destroy, you know, we got that. We control Boston. It's good. Everything's just going to be all right. Now, he's going to have to deal with this guy named Lord North. And Lord North, he's going to be the prime minister throughout most of the war. He's going to have to handle this. You know, if anything goes wrong, he's going to get the blame. It's going to be his government. So Lord North, you kind of have to know who he is just because he's the guy. You know, he's like the head of the official government. You know, he's not the head of the state, so to speak, but he's the head of the government. He's got nice garments. And, of course, you notice the name Lord. You know, it's a title. It's going to be thrown out in front. But check out the red. You know, the red, this dark red, that's the British Empire at this time. And, of course, you can see the American colonies, big chunk of that. So they're like, we want to hang on to this. Now, this map doesn't exactly look like it's totally accurate for the time, but you can kind of see it's close. All right. So, anytime you've got a war going on, you're going to have advantages, you're going to have disadvantages of the two sides. The British, one of their big advantages is going to be population. They got a population of over 8 million people. That's about 4 times the population of the American colonies. If they had to, you know, they could throw an army. You know, if they just threw everyone that they could in there, you know, they could send an army, 175,000 men over here if they wanted to. They're not going to do that. The problem is going to be money. I mean, all this was kind of set off because they were in debt from the French and Indian War. They were trying to tax the colonies, and the colonists threw a big hissy fit. But throughout the course of the war, they're going to spend about $3 million a year on the war, 3 million pounds. That's a lot of weight to throw behind it. But, you know, they're wanting to hang on to these colonies. They're valuable. Of course, anytime you got a war with Britain involved since 1588, the Navy, I mean, it's almost not even worth mentioning, because they got 270 ships of war, the finest Navy in the world. The American colonies, well, we'll get to that in a second. But, you know, the British are always going to have an advantage when it comes to Navy. The colonists, you know, they got a population of about 2 million people, but, you know, they're fighting here. The British have to send their men and supplies over. You can imagine, you know, they've probably got about 30,000 men that they're going to have dedicated to this task. Just imagine feeding those guys every day. What it would take, the logistics, not to mention supplying them. The colonies are going to spend about 75,000 pounds a year on the war. Congress just doesn't have any money. I mean, there are times the Patriot Army isn't even going to be getting paid for like years at a time. Technically, you know, I found stats that said we had one ship that we could actually throw out there that was fit for duty. Of course, we're going to build more. The French are going to give us more eventually when they get involved in this war. But, you know, 275 to 1, that's a pretty big disadvantage. Now, The pluses, what do we got? Home soil. These guys are fighting for their home soil. Anytime guys are fighting to defend their home with their family just down the road, a foreign army in the vicinity, they're going to fight a lot better. They're going to fight a lot harder. Not to mention they know the roads, they know the terrain, they know where to make a stand, they know the cuts through the woods, they know the places to lay the ambushes. So the home soil is going to be a big advantage. And better leadership. You're going to hear a lot, about the leadership of George Washington. He was the right man for the job at the right time. Now, he just didn't have, the best, experience in the French and Indian War, but he had more military leadership than anyone else, and he just understood the situation. No, we don't have to defeat the British Army. We just have to make this war last until they're no longer willing to fight. And when the opportunity arises to take advantage, he had 3 big victories in the war, 2 of them about a week apart, when the opportunity presented itself. And then, of course, he's going to win the last war, the one that matters. The British leadership, they had a few guys that knew what they were doing, but they're always stepping on each other's toes. There's time, their relationships with each other, their heated disagreements, their pride is going to get in the way. And the soldiers are going to see through this, Also, the American soldiers, they're fighting for a cause they believe in. They're fighting for their freedom. The British soldiers are over here fighting because it's their job. That's what they're told to do. So, with this war, as with anything else, you're going to notice there's like 3 different types of people. There's the type that's going to adopt this side of the issue. That's going to be their cause. They're going to get all in with the Patriot cause. These people, are going to support the war. About a third of the country, particularly in the South and in New York, you got a lot of people that are very loyal to the king. You got a lot of Scotsmen in the western part of North Carolina. A lot of Loyalists in Virginia. These people are going to be called Tories. And there's going to be times in the war that these guys are nearly going to cost the Patriots the war. Because if they knew any type of information they could get to the British, they are going to try. In the South, Britain is going to be able to field entire units made up of these Loyalists. And, the problems that America had with the British, most of it happened in New England. The Boston Tea Party, the Boston Massacre. The Southerners really weren't feeling the brunt of the push back from Britain yet. And remember, a lot of these Southerners, the wealthy aristocracy, they were the Cavalier class. A lot of them were the second, third sons of noblemen who came over here, set up plantations, but they still had very close ties to Britain. So a lot of these people are going to be ran out of the country. A lot of them are going to be persecuted. After the war is over, a lot of these people actually get on boats, go to Nova Scotia. It does divide the country quite a bit. But the part that really amazes me about a third of the country, honestly, didn't care who won. They're like, this isn't going to change my lifestyle one way or another if my government is here or there. Some people even said, would you rather have one tyrant 3,000 miles away governing you, or would you rather have 3,000 tyrants governing you a mile away? They kind of liked being part of the British Empire because your authority is so far away. So the people who supported King George III were sometimes called Tories, sometimes called Loyalists. Okay, the Patriots. These are the people that are going to either take up arms and fight for the American cause, or they're going to support it. So you might hear them referred to as the Patriot Army. The New England Patriot football team's named after these guys. New England's where the war started. That's where the Patriots play. So it makes sense. That's very easy to remember. All right, John Adams. John Adams is going to be a vital leader for the Americans during this war and, of course, thereafter. He's a smart guy. He kind of understands the situation, the sense of timing and what's going on. And they're sitting there in Continental Congress, and he knows that the American Army, this militia besieging Boston, has no leader, has no money, has no supplies, no cannons, all these things that you actually need to fight a war. He's like, we need to get a hold of some of that. He also knew that Ticonderoga was in upstate New York. And he knew that this fort that the British had captured from the French during the French-Indian War, I mean in bloody battle, thousands of British casualties capturing this fort. He knows this is full of weapons and supplies and cannons and everything that the Patriot Army needs. He also knows there's a very good chance these guys in the fort have no idea that there's a war going on. You know, news traveled very slowly back then. You had to actually send a messenger out there to them and say, hey, there's a problem. And it's from England's standpoint, you know, is it even a war yet? So he knows we could probably go just take this thing very easily. So they commission a group of guys. They're like, let's get Ethan Allen to go out there. Now, Ethan Allen, you know, out there from the Vermont, New Hampshire area, he had a militia that was actually raised not to fight the French, not to fight the British, not even to fight the Indians on the frontier. This was to protect his home's claim to that area, because they in New York kind of had this disagreement. So we're talking about a group of guys operating in that Vermont, New Hampshire area, and they're rugged frontier types, and they are up for a fight. So he's like, let's get them to go take this fort, because odds are we can get away with that. Around the same time, Connecticut was sending one of their own out there, a guy named Benedict Arnold. Brilliant young commander, a guy who has a very, very, very large ego. And they commissioned him to go do the same thing. Now this creates a very big problem, because both of these guys have these enormous egos, just full of ambition and pride, and they're both stubborn and bullheaded. It is a miracle these two guys, one of them didn't kill the other. But they're going to get out there on Lake Champlain around the same time. Hey, where are you going? Ticonderoga. Where are you going? Ticonderoga. They're going to argue over who's in charge. They're finally going to come to the consensus, all right, let's just both go. At the same time, you lead your men, I'll lead mine. So they sit there and wait for these boats that never show up. And they managed to commandeer a few, and a few of those that were sent out there finally did arrive, and they're like, well, they can only take about 85 guys. Not near their whole contingent. And every day they stay there raises the chance that the British are going to be tipped off, or spot them or whatever, or just be informed that there's a war. So they each pick, about 40 of their best guys, load up in these boats, and they start crossing the lake, and there's this big storm that rolls in that makes it even more dangerous, but at least it shields them, them from, the British noticing that these guys are coming along. So they get across and they launch a joint attack. Now, they both refuse to be under the command of the other, but they get out there, they storm the fort. So May 10th, 1775, 85 men. They're actually come into contact with one guy. There's one guy defending them, and he tries to get a shot off, gun misfires. They storm into the fort, and they capture it without firing a single shot, which is pretty amazing. Most of the guys in the drunk, they were either drunk tank, basically, partying the night before, or they were sick. A lot of the British actually sent guys here to recover, and they had no idea war was going on. So a lot of these guys were in their beds, including the commander. Ethan Allen storms up to the commander's barracks, beats on the door, and he's like, "Come out, you crusty old rat!" And the officer, comes to the door, gun in one hand, breeches in the other, his embarrassed little lady friend, cowering under the covers. And he's like, "By whose authority do you trespass upon the property of the king?" And Ethan Allen's like, "In the name of the great Jehovah and the Continental Congress." They get a load here, over 80 cannons, couple of howitzers, over 30,000 muskets, just stockpiles of ammunition. But the problem is, Benedict Arnold's like, we need to get note of this, send word to Continental Congress, this is what we got, this is the outcome. Ethan Allen and his men, they're wanting to party. They're like busting into the liquor stores, and they're getting drunk, and Arnold's like getting in Allen's face, and he's like, "You should control your men." And Allen's like, "Make me." Now again, it's kind of a Surprised neither one physically harmed the other, but they both make official reports to Congress. They're both going to claim the glory for themselves. And when they realize this is kind of dumb, sending 2 men, to send, we need every guy we got to hold this fort. So Ethan Allen apologizes. He's like, dude, let's just send 1 guy. They'll get word to Congress. Arnold agrees. Arnold's official report disappears. Ethan Allen somehow makes it to Congress. I did this, I did that, I did this. Real no mention of Benedict Arnold at all. And of course, this is the first in a very long series of events that's going to lead Benedict Arnold down a very dark and treacherous path. So that is kind of where Arnold's going to be left. Now, you kind of look at these 2 guys, which one's the guy you want to follow? You got Benedict Arnold, looks dashing, charming, brave, bold in his military uniform. Ethan Allen kind of looks like someone's drunk grandpa here. But that, of course, doesn't mean he can't fight, doesn't mean he wasn't into a good scrap, because he certainly was. But that's phase 1 of the American Revolution.